Hi everyone. Well, I still sound quite croaky, but thought I'd jump on and see how you're doing with week one. One of the major purposes of week one is to get you used to how each week the subject will be structured. You will see a series of activities. As you work through them, remember to tick them off on the right hand side. Those little boxes, I think they're really helpful. Give them a tick. I think most of you will have noted down the assessment details and due dates. Don't stress too much about the assessment details yet. I'll give you heaps more information about the assessments next week. You've got a short quiz this week, but we'll really get into it next week. By this stage of week one, you should have had a look at the intended learning outcomes and thought about the difference between a chronic disease and a chronic condition. I think most of us think about chronic disease as heart disease, diabetes, asthma, but have you thought about long-term enduring mental illness as a chronic condition? Have you thought about somebody who's got one of the low prevalence orders like bipolar or schizophrenia and that they may have had that for 40 years? Have you thought about little kids with dental decay? We'll talk more about that in the subject. In Activity 1.5, I encourage you to read and really engage with the great report of Hal Sverrisson and Stephen Duckett. It was produced in 2016. I think the thing that I find most intriguing, and that's written on the site, is that we spend over $1 billion a year planning and coordinating the management of chronic conditions, yet 250,000 visits to hospitals each year could be prevented with better chronic conditions self-management. And we hear stories consistently about failures in the healthcare system. One of the most compelling stories I was told recently was in my research by a young woman with a young family. Her husband had a serious episode of mental illness. One day everything was great. He'd had no history of mental illness, a high functioning, normal sort of family really, doing normal family stuff. He went on a fishing trip and the next day she got a call to say he had been admitted to a psychiatric facility quite a distance away from their home. She had no idea what had happened and was in a state of shock. Her life was hell for the next 3 months, managing the kids while her husband was in hospital. She obviously visited him really frequently, but found it really hard to try and get any information about what was happening. Probably because people really didn't know. They didn't know what had caused it. It just happened. One day she got a call to say, pick your husband up, it's ready to go home. She was told to contact her GP if she needed anything. She said on the drive back, she just sort of felt like that little attention had been given to her and, some guidance about how they were going to self-manage. Some of the things she talked about to me was like her teenage daughter had said to her, this has happened to Dad, is this going to happen to me? And she had absolutely no idea how to answer that or where to turn. She spent a year desperately seeking support. So she phoned everybody that would listen and just kept getting referred on to a different service or a different person. She eventually found the right service but was told that they were recruiting and that someone would ring her back. She told me a year later she was still waiting for that phone call. When I visited her, what was really, what made me really so, just really to think about how that woman was coping, she pointed to a knife block and said every night she wondered whether she should lock up the knives. She just felt like her life was out of control and she felt like she was living in this situation where, nobody had given her any skills to cope. Nobody had sort of supported her in how her family could self-manage as a family. And she was really struggling. I always struggle. I occasionally, when I get the student feedback about the subject back, there's always a student who fills out the evaluation of the subject and says, it's common sense, or we all know this, or I didn't learn anything. And I think the thing when I read that, I always think, if that's the case, why do people feel so alone, like that woman with a husband with serious mental illness, who just really struggled to get support? Why do people feel so poorly prepared to manage their own health? Or why is it that those 250,000 people that Helen and Stephen write about turn up in hospitals with conditions that could have been managed? As you read the Sverrisson and Duckett article, I want you to really think about your own chronic conditions or people you know who have a chronic condition. How good are you at managing your chronic condition? My colleagues will tell you I'm shocking at managing my asthma. I have 5 degrees, a PhD, and supposedly viewed as an expert in primary health. I've published internationally, and a lot of people, say to me, you've got so much expertise. Yet, do I use my preventer? I've been sick all week. Am I using my asthma preventer? No, I wait till I'm really sick, and then I think, I must get my Ventolin out. There are a multitude of reasons why people don't self-manage. If self-management was easy, we would all exercise more, eat well, sleep heaps, and be calm. But life isn't like that. I was reading a really interesting study the other day in my role as an editor for an international journal. Students often tell me that encouraging people to self-manage is really easy. The results of that study made it clear that very few health professionals feel confident in supporting people to self-manage. Often when you meet a person, what you see is not really what is going on. A mum with a child with asthma who presents constantly at the emergency department. Yes, the child might have asthma, but do your critical thinking skills come into play? What is happening in their home life? Could this mum be just looking for someone to talk to? As you get more experience, you are hypothesizing in your head constantly, developing tentative thoughts. I wonder if this could be going on. I wonder if that could be going. Thinking about goals, trying to build the full picture. I feel incredibly lucky in that I've had a 35-year career, probably more than that, but that makes me feel really old, to develop my chronic condition self-management skills. I'm getting better, but still could improve. I have a quiz for you to do this week. I've set this because I want you to read the Sverrisson and Duckett report really well. If it was me, I'd print it off and I'd take to it with a highlighter. It will be central to your assessment that we will talk lots about next week. I'm really excited about sharing my expertise in chronic conditions. I'm really excited about sharing my experience of working with communities. And I think for next week, I'm quite excited about bringing the expertise that I have as a director, as a board member on a number of health service boards. As I've said on the discussion board, teaching an online subject can be a lonely endeavour. If you don't all engage, I sit in my office and I think, okay, are they out there? Are they okay? I can promise you the more you engage, the more you will learn, and plus it will be much more fun. So thanks heaps for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. See ya.